is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to episode number 5 of the Vintage RPG Podcast with Hambone and Stu, once again broadcasting from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. With me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwittable.com. He tried to Jedi mind trick me out of podcasting in this heat, and I said we got to do it anyway, man. Stu Horvath.
Howdy.
How you doing today, Stu?
It is still hot.
It's never not going to be hot.
I don't like this.
I want to say, I'm projecting now, I think maybe around episode 12 or 13, we'll be saying, oh, it's finally getting cold.
Yeah. I'm going to look forward to that.
It's a little ways off.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about West End Games' Star Wars RPG.
Indeed.
We are also, I have a very, very big update on my Big Trouble in Little China game that I'm going to save for the end of the show.
Lies. It's all lies.
Oh, well, there is lots to talk about. But first, we're going to talk about the game we played last night, which is super fun. So I apparently have been really into programming games lately, and I was looking through the selection here at the clubhouse, and I stumbled upon Colt Express. Now, that is not C-U-L-T Express. It's Colt, C-O-L-T. It's a train robbing game.
Every time I hear it, I think that it's a train robbing game about cults. Like Lovecraftian.
I feel like that's a missed out. They left money on the table with that.
They might have.
So this game is for up to 6 players.
Yep.
And what it is little pop-ups of a train, and you have to rob it. Everyone gets to play a different character with different abilities, and you are moving through the train, above the train, back and forth. You're shooting at people. You're shooting at the sheriff. You're trying to come out with the most possible treasure that you can, robbing a train.
It's great.
You know, it's one of those things where I've always wanted to, like, I love heist movies, right? I like heist movies. I like adventure movies like that. I like westerns.
But you love, we were talking about it last week, Leverage.
I love Leverage.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this is similar in the way that you are robbing something. It is dissimilar in the way that it's every man for himself.
Indeed.
And there's a good dynamic, too, where you can play cards to screw over your friends.
Yeah.
Where, you know, your movement is all determined by cards. How you move, where you move. And if you do it right, you could always send the sheriff after your buddies.
Yeah.
In the most just kerfuffle, it becomes a kerfuffle.
Yeah.
And just when you think you're ahead, you're no longer ahead. On a dime, the entire game dynamic can change.
Yeah. Well, I think that we don't have a lot of experience with programming games in general. So the idea of like laying out your strategy that'll get, you know, acted upon once the action phase happens, I think that like we're still working to get our brains around that.
Right.
So basically what happens is, you know, a couple people will just earnestly be like, I'm going to make my plan and try and execute it. And then there's one guy at the table who's just like, I am going to screw everything up for everybody. And it winds up just being like this great leveler where you think you're going to get all the money and you know, it comes down to 1 or 2 bags of loot at the end.
And this is the kind of game where it truly isn't even playing field. So every man for himself or woman, and every person who is playing this game has equal skin in the game. You can absolutely. There is a shooting dynamic where you have 6 bullets. So you can actually shoot other players. You could punch other players. It is a train robbing game.
Yeah. When you shoot somebody, you give them a bullet card, and that goes into their the random draw deck. That's the other thing. It's a random draw deck, so you can't just program on the fly with the cards you want. You have to program with the cards you get.
Right.
So if you get stuck with a bullet, that's one less card you can draw on to make your strategy. You get shot a lot, chances are you're going to draw more bullets. You're going to have less actions.
Right. And it's a game where you don't die, you just have less actions, which I think is pretty cool because it's something where they keep you in the game up until the very end.
Yeah, you don't want to... Knocking a person out of the game completely is no good anymore.
No, there's no... I don't really feel like there's a lot of games that have been like that lately because, you know, no one wants their buddy just to be sitting there with their arms folded looking at their phone, you know, harumphing and going, oh, God, why am I still here hanging out? When's this game going to end? Yeah. So even if you are losing, it's a good game to be able to stay in and play. And it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous because you actually have pop-up... You build a train.
Yeah, the 3D train it's a little unwieldy. I feel like it should be like 10% bigger because I have big fingers.
Oh, yeah, well everyone's got fat fingers around the table. So some of the pieces were a little bit harder to move. And it uses meeples as meeples as the actual characters, the cowboys, the cowgirls.
Little wooden gunfight meeples.
Little wooden gunfight meeples. And they also, they make setting pieces for it. So you have little cactuses, little stones. Yeah. So your whole table looks like you are in the desert and you are chasing this train. What does the game run, Stu?
I think it's like a $30 game.
And it's got a lot of replay value because what I found with these programming games is you're never going to actually get the same game twice.
Exactly.
You have the same setting, got the same characters. However, anything goes.
I gotta say, just real quick, those little standees that are like the cactus and the scenery. If I was a kid and I owned this game, that stuff would all be out of the box and with my action figures.
Oh yeah.
And I just love that about that.
Yeah, so I definitely look forward to playing Colt Express again.
Colt Express, not Colt Express.
Yeah, I should enunciate that a little better.
When we first started talking about the game, everybody's like, Colt Express. I'm like, wow, this sounds so great. And then it comes out, I'm like, oh, it's a game about trains.
It is a game about trains.
There's not a tentacle to be seen.
All right, so moving along, we are going to talk about West End Games Star Wars, the role-playing game today. Now, most people I know are Star Wars fans. I've never in my life have come across a person who hadn't seen or understood something about Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars in our culture is so ingratiated into the world at large. Even if you've never seen a movie, you've gone to Target, you've been in the supermarket, you've seen something that has the Star Wars logo on it, or you know who R2-D2 is, you know what a Chewbacca is, you know they fly around in space, you know what a lightsaber is, even if you call it a laser sword. Star Wars is everywhere. So the one place that Star Wars wasn't was at the gaming table. So West End Games released Star Wars the role-playing game in 1987, and it was hot on the heels of their Ghostbusters RPG, which really did lay most of the groundwork for Star Wars the game.
Yeah, so the Ghostbusters game is a very simple D6 mechanic, and Greg Costikyan for Star Wars basically made it more complicated, in a good way. It's still a lower difficulty level in terms of like rule-heavy stuff that you have to keep in your head than D&D.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. It came out in 1987, and I think that in this modern age where you can't escape Star Wars, though some people might want to.
My Trekkie friends, mostly.
But, Star Wars is everywhere. You can't go anywhere. It ties in everywhere. In 1987, I feel like you were in a downturn for Star Wars. I think that after Return of the Jedi came out, you had the Ewok movies and you had the droids and Ewok cartoons, and that's basically it. And I think that it was relegated to sort of a kids thing, and as a franchise, it was considered complete in a way.
It was. And that's actually a great point because the story, as we knew it, was over.
Yeah.
Even though it was called Episode 4, 5, and 6, Star Wars, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, story was done.
Yeah.
The characters' arcs had been completed, and that's all you had. Everything that was coming out after that, it was really kiddish. It was very, the droids cartoon in the Ewok movie is just, you thought the Star Wars Holiday Special was bad. Wait till you see the Ewoks movies, folks. The worst.
Don't do it to yourself. Just don't.
This isn't a dare. It's the drizzling shits. They're terrible. And I love Ewoks.
You're drinking out of an Ewok glass.
I'm drinking out of an Ewok glass right now. Yeah, no, bad movie.
Yeah, so I feel like if you had to credit or blame any one incident on the current state of Star Wars, the fact that Star Wars continues to exist, I really credit the Star Wars role-playing game. I don't think I think that it maintained a certain level of interest for fans, because you got to remember that we didn't have the internet in '87. We didn't have access to all of this Star Wars stuff. If you wanted Star Wars, if you wanted more of it, where did you go? There were a couple art books. There were a couple novelizations. There just wasn't a lot of material. So I think one of the first things that the Star Wars RPG did was it gave you lots of pictures from the movies. And it gave you access to Ralph McQuarrie's art, concept art, is used as illustrations,
which for a fan you would be hard pressed to have seen that. I'd never seen it.
Yeah,
I'd heard whispers of it, but I'd never seen it up until then.
Yeah, and it took a long time before that stuff was available in color. There's three sketchbooks that are out that came out in the early '80s that did give you access to it. But in my day, and I was a pretty huge Star Wars fan, I only ever saw the Return of the Jedi one. The other two just never popped up on my radar.
Right.
So just in that, in getting access to the visuals of the universe of Star Wars, the Star Wars RPG appeals even if you have no intention of playing Star Wars. You want these books just for the fact that these are Star Wars artifacts and they'll give you a little bit more. That said, the game is a very good RPG. I would say that it's one of the big 3 or 4 80s RPGs. It's good. You have it's skill-based system, D6. Your skills go up by a number of you can have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. DM or probably Game Master. I don't know what they call it in Star Wars.
Yeah,
Keeper of the Force.
Yeah.
Probably not. So you get, they'll give you you want to jump, across a ravine and you get a difficulty number. You roll your dice, and if you hit it, you win. You succeed. Pretty simple. There's a lot of force powers, and it functions all on a skill-based kind of system. Super simple. Very easy to pick up. Cinematic in its play. Doesn't get bogged down in a lot of rule minutia. So that's another thing that's really great about it. Once it came out, though, they realized that they could sort of infinitely dig into stuff because they needed to put out more books.
Right.
So, and they had a whole really underdeveloped Star Wars universe to play around in. So Star Wars, the role-playing game, I think, is really the birthplace of the extended universe, out of which you'll eventually get novels and cartoons and other stuff that was all thrown out recently and is sort of being cherry-picked for the new movies.
Right, and the new cartoons as well.
Yeah.
Well, Timothy Zahn cites the Star Wars West End role-playing game as the backdrop for the Thrawn trilogy.
Exactly. They gave him a box of... he needed research, so LucasArts gave him a box of the West End RPG source books.
That's awesome.
And it feels like it. You read those novels. Those aren't novels those aren't Star Wars movie novels. Those are Star Wars role-playing game novels. If you're familiar with the role-playing game material. And I think that when you don't have that RPG background and you read the Zahn novels, they seem insane, bonkers. Like, this is Star Wars like you've never seen. And that's why I think you have... I think that the Star Wars revival, I think the Zahn books came out in 91, 92.
Yeah, I want to say around then.
Yeah, so I think when those hit, that reignited a popular interest in Star Wars that leads directly to, the prequels and, the huge, massive media conglomeration that it is now. All of that is down to just the mere existence of the Star Wars role-playing game.
So I looked it up as you were talking. It's Game Master.
It is Game Master?
It is Game Master. So the Thrawn trilogy is also known as Heir of the Empire by Timothy Zahn. They are the stories that take place in the Star Wars EU 5 years after the events depicted in the 83 Star Wars film Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
What's amazing about it is the books came out in 1991. 92 was the second, 93 was the third.
Yep, I got them all through the Science Fiction Book Club.
God, that's so cool. That's so cool. Like, I'm a latecomer to some of the outside of your base level sci-fi, which is, your Star Wars, the things that you'd see in the movies and the big theater houses. So, it's one of those things I always wish I did back in the day, was be a part of those sci-fi book clubs.
Yeah, it was cool. It was totally a scam, but it was a cool scam.
Right. So I'm going to digress from that point, though. So back to gameplay and mechanics. Now, a game like this, they did put out a lot of supplements for it. So it did start off with the first edition in 87, second edition in 92, which is actually the book I have.
Okay.
I have the 92 role-playing game source book.
It's sort of the purplish cover with Vader on the...
Yeah, my version's a blue cover with silver printing. Because the first one, the 87 one, was just your typical Star Wars poster.
Yeah.
The second edition, revised, expanded in 96, has the Millennium Falcon on it. So that's how you can tell the difference between the editions. Yep,
the third edition book is larger. It has more material. It's full color, and it is ugly as sin. I have never been so disappointed by like a sexy modernization of an RPG book and then the third edition of the Star Wars RPG. The illustrations are so bad.
Oh, tell me that's not true.
There's something about this book that I hate.
So hey, hold it sideways so I can see how the spine looks. Okay, so my second edition source book of it is like half the size. It's so thin.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I got it, because I got it. Actually, you gave it to me.
Yeah.
Because you got you found a bunch of extra copies, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And I'm thumbing through it. I'm like, that's it. It was really scant, I think is the word I'm looking for here. It was so. I mean, there was a lot of good information in it. However, if I hold it up against, say, like a player's handbook.
Yeah.
Or even like, your basic Cthulhu rules or any other game system. There's a little more meat on the bones.
Yeah, well, I mean, they didn't have a lot to work with. And early on, they didn't have the confidence to just jump in and get into really world building. I think the strategy initially was to just kind of come up with backstories and reconcile all of the pre-production art and just make all of that real and present in the Star Wars universe, so that you just build out stories for, like, who is that weird alien that was supposed to be Jabba the Hutt, or who is that weird bounty hunter that eventually became Boba Fett, and you just build out the universe that way. So but you also had a very limited amount of material to draw from. So once they did all that and exhausted that material, they had to come up with new stuff, and that's when I think that they started doing really interesting things. And then it eventually becomes like a cycle, because the Zahn books come out, and then they put out these fantastic source books detailing all of the Zahn stuff in West End game terms. And it's, it makes the books that were born from the Star Wars RPG a deeper dive for Star Wars RPG people. It was just so good.
It's really interesting too, because as far as supplements go, so you had the core book. Between 87 and 98, they put out over 50 supplemental books for this. So in the late 80s, you have your campaign pack. You have some modules like Tatooine Manhunt. You have Starfall, Other Space.
The adventures are largely not very good. They often don't feel like Star Wars at all. Just it seems like a generic kind of sci-fi.
Just a dungeon crawl, essentially.
Yeah, they fix that later. They do a campaign that's over multiple books and boxes called the Cathol Rift, which I think is pretty good.
Right.
And feels Star Warsy. But most of the early adventures, you could probably skip them.
Well, 89, they started putting out Galaxy Guides.
The Galaxy Guides are classic.
Specifically, New Hope. One I find really interesting is that you have a Galaxy Guide for Yavin and Bespin. Third Galaxy book was Empire Strikes Back, and then a Galaxy book that was Alien Races, which to me is what I'm curious to see in Star Wars, because as a kid growing up, I loved... And we've spoken about this in detail. I love old 80s toy artwork.
Yeah.
I love looking at, right now, in part of your collection, I'm looking at an advanced D&D Kellic on the wall in the package, still with the bubble on it. And you flip it over, and it'll show you a really cool scene of, like, creatures fighting, but it'll only show you a few other accessories or creatures that you could buy.
Get these toys, too.
But it wasn't very robust.
Yeah.
Whereas with, like, Star Wars and G.I. Joe even, it's like, look at the back. It's like, no, look at all these guys.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know the aliens' names. I wanted to know where they were from. I wanted to know, like, what they were all about. Because one of my favorite scenes in Star Wars is the cantina.
Absolutely.
Where, not everyone looks like a human being.
Yeah.
And you've got tons of different alien races, and they're just all hanging out together, coexisting, drinking in this bar, looking for trouble. And that to me is one of my favorite parts of Star Wars. So a source book like that.
Yeah, and like with the cantina scene is really brilliant, because I think that it was a big change from Star Trek, where Star Trek the aliens always read as human being in makeup.
Right.
And I think that the cantina scene, even though a lot of there's like a werewolf mask, they look like Halloween masks, a lot of them. But then there's a couple like the Hammerhead and that weird fist thing with the spikes. There's that just don't look human at all. There's no reference point for them, and that was like the first time you saw that on screen in a movie. And even though they're just background characters, you want more. And the Aliens book gives you so much.
And that's the thing. Growing up, at Star Trek.
Yeah.
So your sci-fi is generally limited, Star Trek on TV. In reruns, you got Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right? Star Trek was always like, okay, so it's a bunch of humans, and we will deal with maybe one, maybe two aliens.
Yeah.
The aliens at that point weren't intermingling.
Yeah.
Whereas, in Star Wars, you look at the murderer's row of bounty hunters that they sent after Han Solo.
Yeah.
Everyone's different.
Yeah.
Like in Star Wars, there is life on other planets, and there are planets where they all kind of hang out and go to.
Yeah.
It's a cultural melting pot for alien races, which I think is something that really speaks to the idea. As much as Star Trek was the idea of harmony in the universe and, coexisting and really being a trailblazer for different people coming together. You actually saw it in Star Wars.
Yeah.
You actually saw it on screen.
And it's interesting, too, because if you actually look at Star Trek, there's the idea of sort of harmony, but everybody's very segregated, at least in the first show.
Right.
You have the Klingons are separate from the Federation, or separate from the Vulcans, or separate from the Romulans. Once you finally do get a whole bunch of people in a melting pot, it's Deep Space Nine, and it doesn't really go that well. you know? So, like, there's interesting politics in Star Trek that you don't really, because it has that reputation, and then when you sort of look at the execution of it, you're like, oh, that's odd.
Well, Star Trek, always big in my eyes, first interracial kiss on TV.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that as far as breaking barriers and kicking doors open, man, big ups to the Trekkies for that one.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That was a huge one.
Yeah.
It's different though from what Star Wars was trying to get. So I feel like I got two sides of two very different galaxies.
Yes.
And that's cool, man. There's room for everyone at the party.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there used to be. Now everybody hates each other.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Oh, God. I almost didn't want to do this because it's just like, are we going to get angry Star Wars people?
Oh, definitely.
How do we live in a world where there's angry Star Wars people, Hambone?
I just remember being young and just wanting Star Wars back so bad. And then we got the remastered in the theaters of the original trilogy, where Lucas cocked it all up and, Han wasn't shooting first anymore.
Yeah.
And remember being so mad about that. But I wasn't mad at other fans. I was mad at him.
Yeah.
And then I remember getting really excited because it's like, all right, we're gonna do this new series of movies taking place before. We're going to see more of the Star Wars universe. And everyone was like, yeah, all right, finally. We're going to see some expanded universe stuff.
We're going to learn what the Clone Wars were.
We're going to see it. And then we got it. And it's a matter of like, wow, you got to watch what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because it was nothing like the things that I'd read. It was nothing like the things that I'd seen. It was about a trade war. And it was like watching paint dry.
But honestly, it might have increased socio-political relevance in our modern era.
Which is crazy when you think about that. How actually the prequels became very horribly relevant.
Yeah.
God.
But none of and all of that stuff was from a fan perspective, and this is why I'm sort of like really self-critical about being a fan of anything. Like I felt real anger at Phantom Menace after a while. I didn't like that feeling, and I didn't know where to put it, so I just let it go.
Which is healthy.
Yeah. I never once thought, maybe I should write George Lucas a stern letter telling him what I really think about it. I'm sure somebody did back then. I'm sure plenty of people did. But I feel like now there's no stopping people from being really angry about Star Wars, and when they should really just be like, it's just a movie.
You know what? And that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we're going to get real for a second, I'll say that... I said some dumb shit when Han didn't shoot first. Like, you were there for a lot of it. I was, God, I can't believe it, and bracket. And, I was angry.
Yeah.
And then, as I got older, and I realized that, why do I care? Like, I had a moment in time, I saw Han shot first. I'm never going to forget that.
Yeah.
I got excited because I was getting more Star Wars. And a lot of it, maybe it wasn't good. And then, again... with everything in life, you're not always going to get what you want.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get what you need.
Yeah.
It's gotten to a point now where I get really bummed out when I go on the internet because, man, there was a time growing up where I didn't have friends like you and our other group of friends who had similar interests as I did. And being welcomed into that world was like, oh my God, this is what was missing my entire life. I can't, for the life of me, fathom how horrible it must be and feel to be like a female or a person of color or anyone who is not like a straight cis white dude who suddenly feels like they want to be a part of something and everyone's trying to keep them out.
Yeah.
Just because reasons that make fucking no sense to anybody.
Yeah.
And my thing is, man, I would have killed when I was younger to have more people at the party, more diverse people at the party, people hanging out, people excited about the things that I'm excited about.
Exactly.
Instead of the people who were trying to kick my ass as a kid.
Yeah.
Because they were not excited about the things I was excited about. And that sucked. They hit me with fists.
Yeah.
And not just words on the internet, which are, in some ways a lot worse. So, we're probably going to get heat from some Star Wars fans over this because they got their knickers in a twist about episode, the Last Jedi, and that there's a strong female lead. Well, hello, honey, I gotta tell you something. There was a strong female lead from the very fucking beginning.
Yeah.
Her name was Princess Leia, now a general. It's always been there.
Yeah.
You're getting mad about stuff that's always been there, and I just don't get it.
It's sad. And I, as a person, I've had this very up and down relationship with Star Wars. I was huge into Star Wars as a kid. And I was huge into Star Wars through high school because of the Star Wars role-playing game. And the prequels kind of put me out of it, and I grew up. And I stopped, like, it's not that Star Wars is bad. If Star Wars was great, I would be totally into it. I still like Rogue One. You know, Rogue One was an interesting movie for me, and I only watched it once, and I'm pretty sure that if I ever watch it again, I won't like it as much. But it was still that one time I had a little bit of that Star Wars thing back, and that was cool. Last Jedi, Force Awakens, not for me. Whatever. Like,
that's cool.
I'm not going to yell at anybody on the internet about it, and it took me a long time to get there, though. So I at the same time, I also realized that there is a process with this, and it took me a long time to really care. There was a point where I just didn't want any Star Wars anywhere.
Right.
And now I'm okay, and I can go back to the Star Wars role-playing game and go, man, this was really good. This was fun. I had a lot of fun with it. It means something to me. Other parts of Star Wars don't, and I don't need to interface with that.
And that's cool.
Fine. Yeah.
And that's cool because there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
I just want to let it be known that we want everyone to come to the party and play games with us. We want everyone to feel comfortable and welcome to hang out, rip some games, have some laughs, and just enjoy the things that you enjoy. So you're all on our team, Team Unwinnable. So let's bring it home and away from the emotions a little bit. What about...
It got heavy there.
It did get heavy. We went dark.
Yeah, well, it's a dark world we live in.
It is a dark world we live in. So gameplay-wise, so one of the main questions I had about, for you who's run this game before, Jedis.
Yeah.
So Jedi is kind of a tricky thing in the movies, in the cartoons, because it's kind of like, someone who has somewhat godlike powers against people who don't.
Yeah.
So how did that really work in the game?
So basically, the original iteration of the game was it's really hard to be a Jedi. There aren't a lot of them.
Right.
So force sensitivity was, I think, something that you rolled for. And if you didn't get it, you didn't get it.
Oh, so like being a paladin.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think. I haven't read the rules in depth in a while, but that's my recollection. Second, everybody wants to play a Jedi, so they revised it so that there were a bunch of more options to be a Jedi. It still works pretty good. It's more like the relationship between a wizard and a warrior, You have to have the skills in lightsaber combat to knock back the laser blasters.
Right.
So you're still risking getting hit. That said, if you're running, it's not a tactical game. So it isn't really that huge of a concern.
Yeah.
It's a cinematic game, and your action sequences should be big and fun and exciting and over the top. And it doesn't really matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter if you have a Jedi because they can't really overpower the party because you're gonna match that Jedi with an evil Jedi.
Right.
Just like there's going to be a bounty hunter for a smuggler.
Okay.
There's always going to be that balance there, and those characters are always going to go at each other, and you don't care about the stormtroopers. The stormtroopers are there just to move you around to the spot. They impede your movement and funnel you into a spot where you need to be. That it's never tactical, and they do have miniature rules, but I just never understood why.
I never got into miniatures.
Yeah,
whether it was D&D or any other game, I love seeing people build their dungeons with their cool miniatures, and I imagine those games are super awesome, and I'd love to play one of those games. But it's kind of a when you're doing tactics and it's just a hex mat and dry erase markers and miniatures, it kind of takes it out of there. But big ups to anyone who loves miniatures because that's cool too, yo.
Yeah.
So with that, that's our talk on West End Star Wars. Feel free to always send corrections or comments to vintagerpg@unwinnable.com.
Yeah, I'm not an authority. I just read a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm probably getting stuff wrong all the time. Feel free to correct me. I love learning.
Yeah, and once we start getting corrections, we'll start mentioning them on the air. So it's my turn to talk about what I'm excited about this week, and I am shit excited.
I don't believe this.
It came.
I don't...
I finally got my game that I pre-ordered last Gen Con.
You didn't bring it to the recording session, though, so I just don't believe that it happened.
Well, I put a picture up. I put a picture up on my Instagram about it.
I am a photo editor. I know about Photoshop.
So I got an email last week from Everything Epic Games, and they said, hey, this is your actual tracking information. And there was an issue with some of the pre-orders that we had with dice that didn't have the full printing on them. So they just went ahead and just threw in an extra pack of dice just to cover it, just in case. So the game is finally out, and it's up for order. Now, I did the pre-order, so the normal game is only a 4-player game. This supports up to 6 with the limited edition gold box pre-order, right? So I paid $99 for my pre-order. You get extra quests, extra cards, extra dice, and an alternate low-pan boss board, which is, the board itself is huge. The board is, like, we're going to need the half the table to really accommodate the board because you have the world above, and then you actually have Lopan's lair, like underground, where you're fighting everybody.
Is this more of like a Scythe-sized game where we're going to have to probably play in the dining room?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. No, this. The box is almost as big as Scythe's, and almost as big as the extra Scythe box you bought that fits all the expansions.
Right on. This is a pretty narrow table.
Tons of miniatures, tons of cards. Now, as a pre-order, I got a 6-demon bag, which was pretty cool, with some extra cards at Gen Con. There was another 6-demon bag inside of the box. So I'm very excited about it. I highly recommend people buy this game. It is going to be a lot of fun, a lot of replay. 4 players for the standard version. If you got the pre-order like I did, man, you are going to be happy when you open it. And you're not going to be happy about all the fucking packing peanuts that are in there. Because, man, do they pack it with a lot of packing peanuts. And I hate packing peanuts.
Did it come with a Jack Burton tank top?
I wish. Man, if it did, I would definitely be at the gym today. You know, it would give me something to work for once. All right, so that is episode number 5 of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you?
Where can they find me? I'm wearing a cloak of invisibility, so they can't find me. No, I'm lying. You can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG and at unwinnable.com, where I write about stuff.
Very cool. You can find me on Twitter at Handbreaker, where I pretty much exclusively tweet about professional wrestling, Dungeons and Dragons. I mostly retweet the Bullet Club and put up pictures of dogs getting groomed because I love animals. And you can also find me at mythaitv.com for my other podcast, My Thai Happy Hour. Every episode I teach you how to make a tiki drink, and then me and my co-host riff on pop culture. So definitely check that out. And for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.